This is BMW 1 Series front-wheel drive.
In 2010, Autocar CO UK quoted Norbert Reichthofer, BMW CEO at the time, who said some 80% of 1 Series drivers were convinced their cars were front-wheel drive. Everyone was surprised, but instead of dwelling upon it, an executive decision was made to save some money and unify mini and entry-model BMW platforms.
In recent years, BMW broke many rules. First there were SUVs, then there were SUVs without all-wheel drive, and then there was a minivan. From this perspective, the front-wheel drive 1 Series is just another step towards unification, synergy, optimizing, and other terms often used during boring corporate meetings, which bring a smile to the shareholder's face because it means higher margins and therefore higher dividend. Yes, this car is your dividend, Fritz. You've taken rear-wheel drive from us in exchange for more expensive wines in your cellar. We will not let you get away with this. Right here, right now is where we draw the line. The world is waking up and change is coming, whether you like it or not. But is this rear-wheel drive business really necessary? Florian Moser, who's in charge of BMW 1 Series communication, told Australian What Car that these days it's hard to tell whether a car is front-wheel drive or rear-wheel drive. That's a bold statement, and we'll get back to that in a moment, but besides petrol heads' inclination to drift the hell out of BMWs in mall parking lots, there are other factors at play when designing a compact car. We interrupt this program for a bit of a lecture on the implications of the front-engine rear-wheel drive and front-engine front-wheel drive layout on interior space. In order to drive the rear wheels from an engine in the front, we need a drive shaft, and that drive shaft goes into a transmission, and the transmission is behind the longitudinally mounted engine. This means a longer engine bay may be required, and the gearbox as well as the shaft eat up some space in the cabin. Space which is particularly precious in a compact car. And now if we take a front-wheel drive car, the engine is mounted transversely using the width of the car, and the gearbox is underneath the engine, and there is no shaft running to the rear axle. This results in more passenger and luggage space while maintaining compact exterior dimensions.
In this car, there is an optional all-wheel drive version, so a place for the shaft remains, but the engine and the gearbox take up less space than in rear-wheel drive cars. End of class dismissed.
Okay, but can you tell this is a front-wheel drive car or not? Like I said in my BMW 2 Series Active Tourer review a few years ago, most of the time you can't tell the difference. You really have to hit some slippery bit of road to realize that the front is running wide, and there is no way to correct it with a bit of oversteer. However, these days the cars have traction control, so you wouldn't be able to correct anything with a bit of oversteer under normal circumstances on a public road. The good news is that even with the 140 horsepower 3-cylinder 1.5 liter engine, you get very direct steering. The car is neutral in the corners, but I feel that on a lower profile tire, perhaps with traction control turned off and with a stiffer suspension, the 1 Series does have some lift-off oversteer potential.
BMW claims this car should use around 6 liters per 100 kilometers combined. I think 7 to 8 is more realistic. The suspension is pleasantly springy, it's sufficiently stiff to give you a taste of a sporty ride, and sufficiently comfortable to drive over some cobblestones and keep all your tooth fillings.
Up to about 90 kilometers per hour, it's relatively quiet inside. Any faster and some very obtrusive road noise fills the cabin. The faster, the louder. The unlikely silver lining here is that just like in the Mercedes-Benz A200, also BMW 118i is not a real motorway cruiser, so foot off the gas.
By the way, I remember this engine from the Mini Cooper I reviewed a few years ago, and it was brilliant, also on open roads. Here I get the feeling everything above certain revs has been detuned to keep the emissions in check. In layman's terms, this engine is good for the city, not necessarily for fun road trips.
There is adaptive cruise control, but there is no proper active lane assist. There is only a system which slightly corrects you and displays warning, but nothing as sophisticated as in the A-Class, where you get semi-autonomous driving under certain conditions. BMW still reserves this tech for more expensive models. Perhaps it's because of the Mini platform, which wasn't designed for such systems in the first place.
Another irritating UKL platform bug or feature is that the wipers stop when the stop and start system restarts the engine. Is this an Alfa Romeo or a BMW?
The brakes bite very low. I experienced the same problem in a BMW 2 Series with sport brakes, or M brakes or whatever they're called, a few years ago. You approach a junction and brake like in any other car, and you almost end up rear-ending the guy in front. And it's not because I recently tested a Porsche 911 and now I'm all like, oh, Porsche stops on a dime and everything else is crap. No, I actually got into this car from a Skoda Scala. So there.
On the plus side, the automatic parking feature is absolutely brilliant, and in my opinion, it is more intuitive than the one in the Mercedes.
Less intuitive than in the Mercedes, in my opinion, is the virtual instrument cluster and the infotainment system.
I talked about it in length in my BMW X5, 8 Series, 3 Series, Z4 reviews. Yes, after some time you can get used to it, but getting used to something is not the same as accepting it. There is too much happening in the virtual cockpit. The rev counter goes in the opposite direction to the Speedo. I didn't like it in the Peugeot 308 and I don't like it in the BMW. I never know how to display the data I want. The only good thing is the map in the middle. Compared to the live cockpit, as it's called, the infotainment system is average, and it still doesn't support Android Auto. You can use NFC to open and start the car, so you can share it with your family and friends. They can use their smartphones instead of asking you for the key, but the only compatible phone is still Samsung Galaxy something, which runs Android. You can also program an NFC card and carry it in your wallet, but you know what? I have an NFC smartphone, so I don't need to carry a wallet. I like the interior. I like how the ambient lighting is incorporated in the silver bars rather than shine from underneath them. There is a place for a phone, cup holders, large door pockets, glove box and storage under the armrest. It's a shame the glove box isn't air-conditioned. There are only 2 USB ports in the front, one is next to the phone cradle and one is under the armrest. Most of the materials are soft-ish to touch. I was quite surprised with the long-looking seats. You can extend them even further. They are very comfortable, of course, as long as you pay extra for electric adjustment with memory function and separately for lumbar support. Really, BMW? There is sufficient legroom in the back, although the headroom is a problem, especially with 3 people sitting abreast when the 2 side passengers need to sit closer to the windows. By the way, the door is low, like in the Mercedes-Benz A-Class. The seats are comfortable. There are air vents as well as 2 USB-C ports. There is a place for bottles in the door bins and for smaller drinks in the armrest. The backrests split 40-20-40. At 380 liters, the boot is on par with VW Golf, 10 liters larger than in the A-Class. There is a false floor, which stays upright. There are 2 last-minute shopping bag hooks. The parcel shelf fits underneath the floor, so you don't have to worry about it when all of a sudden you need to carry something larger in the back. You can open and close the boot with gesture. There is also a button to lock the car as the tailgate is closing. Prices of the F40 BMW 1 Series start at €28,000 for the 118i. At the moment, the only more powerful petrol option is the 306 horsepower M135i, but rumor has it there is going to be a 120i and a plug-in hybrid in due time. There are of course diesel engines as well, with power ranging from 116 to 190 horsepower. This test car with options costs about €43,000.
The new BMW 1 Series has good suspension, good steering, and the engine, well, in this one the engine has been castrated by the emissions regulations. It is a front-wheel drive car, but for most of the time you can't really tell. It's not a bad premium compact car, but I'd add a little bit more to the monthly leasing installment and get a 3 Series instead. And what do you think about compact premium cars? Are they still premium with tiny engines and similar options being available in the mass market segment? Let me know in the comment section below. Subscribe, rate and share. New episodes every Friday. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.